going on, guys? Welcome back to another video on the Lockdown Defense Sports Network. I am your host for today's video, Robert Garcia, Young RG, as Coach likes to call me. And in today's video, we are, of course, continuing on with the week-by-week, division-by-division sort of overall review we are doing for each team in the offseason, leading up to the start of the regular season this year. There's a lot to be excited about, a lot to talk about with a lot of these new teams, a lot of new players, new faces, of course, the rookies, a couple of coaching changes. So we have a lot to discuss and a lot to dive into. And in this week, we are going to be discussing the NFC West, and we will be talking about the Seattle Seahawks in today's episode in particular. Now, are the Seahawks poised for a redemption season after last year, falling just short of the playoffs, still finishing with an above 500 record and double-digit wins at 10-7? However, they fell, like I mentioned, just short to the Rams and trying to win the NFC West there. So what is the outlook for them this year? A couple of the changes they made. They made two big changes, and we will definitely get into them positions-wise. So let's dive right in. First things first, we always like to go over the notable free agent signings. And of course, the top two, maybe as a bit of a spoiler as to the two major positions that they shook up this season, excuse me. The quarterback, Sam Darnold, to a 3-year, $100.5 million deal. And the stud Los Angeles Rams interdivision rival, Cooper Kupp, to a 3-year, $45 million deal. On top of that, they also brought in former Cowboys edge rusher DeMarcus Lawrence to a 3-year, $32.5 million deal, and former Packers wide receiver, although I can't remember where he was on last year. He's bounced around a lot, played for the Packers, Chiefs, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, MVS, to a 1-year, $5.5 million deal, as well as a couple of, just depth pieces, a tight end, Eric Saubert, and the wide receiver, River Cracraft, I think, from the Dolphins there. Saubert has been on a bunch of teams as well. I think the longest he's ever spent on one single team is the Niners for 2 years. And I think he came over from the Bengals, if I'm not mistaken, last year. A couple of the guys that they re-signed as well, Ernest Jones to a 3-year, $33 million deal, and Jerron Reed to a 3-year, $22 million deal. Trying to just keep that D-line intact. Also bringing in DeMarcus Lawrence, although starting to get a little bit up there in age, so we'll see how well they perform this year. Taking a look at the releases as well, a lot of notable releases for them. The biggest one, of course, being Tyler Lockett, the wide receiver, longtime wide receiver there in Seattle, back when Russ was still cooking, and they had some glory days there. Unfortunately, weren't able to make it to a championship. The championship they won was before he got there, but he was still a very impactful player and a fan favorite nonetheless. Draymond Jones, another edge rusher that they had, got released, as well as the defensive interior, Roy Robertson-Harris. Rayshon Jenkins, a former Charger, got released as well, and a tackle in George Fant. Now, getting into it this year, obviously the biggest thing to talk about is the change at quarterback. You go from trading away Geno Smith, and we will get into the trade and that particulars of the trade a little bit later in the video, but just keeping it on Sam Darnold for a second. Do I think he can replicate what he did in Minnesota? I don't. His weapons took a huge step back. You go from having arguably the best wide receiver in football, a very nice number two, you go from having one of the best wide receivers in football, arguably the best in Jay Jettas, a very sound, very good wide receiver two in Addison. And obviously, anytime you pair a wide receiver with one of the best in the league, they're just going to look that much better because the guy opposite of them demands so much recognition. And then also TJ Hawkinson as well, who is a formidable tight end and a serviceable tight end and a very good tight end, especially in that Minnesota system, given how good the offensive line and everything is there. And you go from those three guys to Cooper Kupp, who is nice, but he's 32 years old, and you really started to see that decline in him last year, on top of the injuries that are mounting up. Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is a fantastic wide receiver. You're going to see me catch no hate towards JSN here, but in comparison to Jay Jettas, he's just not that. And of course, the newly signed MVS, who, although I don't think he'll be the wide receiver 3 for long. And once we talk about the draft class, I'll get into that a little bit more. But that's sort of what he has right now, because they really don't have a solid tight end right now at the moment. I think AJ Barner, although, like I mentioned, draft class as well. But AJ Barner is at the moment the starting tight end. So that should tell you everything you need to know about them. I think that although it was a great story, and I'm glad Sam Darnold got his money because he did deserve it. I'm always a big fan to see guys who maybe come out as busts and then sort of find it later on. Baker Mayfield, another one, kind of came out as a bust in Cleveland. Although I personally didn't think he was a bust. Cleveland would love to have him now, but obviously had stints in Carolina and the Rams before eventually finding his way to the Buccaneers and getting that nice payday for him. So love to see guys who are able to bounce back like that, but all that is to be said that I'm not a believer in Sam Darnold. I think that season last year was solely a product of Kevin O'Connell and the weapons he had around him. I already mentioned Jefferson, Hawkinson, and Addison, but the running game as well with Aaron Jones, and I think they added on to that as well by signing Jordan Mason over from the 49ers this past year. So I expect that to get better for the Vikings this year. And of course, they had a very sound O-lineman and a defense that was fantastic. They were 10th in yards allowed and 4th in points allowed, led by Brian Flores. So just all of that. And that's not to say the Seahawks have a bad defense. They have a great defense as well. But I think just coupled with all those weapons on offense, the offensive line, this is obviously a much worse situation for Sam Darnold to be in. They're also going to be using he is now going to go to a team that also utilizes the run game significantly less than what the Vikings did. The Vikings were 14th in the league in terms of rush plays per game. The Seahawks were 29th. So that just goes to show you, and it also goes to show you just how much pressure was on Geno Smith and those wide receivers to perform well because they were getting basically nothing from their running backs. So that's going to be the big question is, can he overcome being the focal point of this offense without having those bona fide studs of wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, outside, things like that. And I mean, just to kind of put it in perspective, like I mentioned, the Vikings were 4th in points allowed, 10th in yards allowed. Seahawks were 13 in points allowed, which is, a sizable gap, 9 spots back. Not horrible, but, sizable. Once you comparing a top 10 to a top 15, you start to see a lot of differences there. And then they were also 12th in yards, so not too far off from there. You won't see a big difference there, but it's definitely that scoring where the big gap is. So yeah, those are just the questions I have for Sam. I personally don't think, I'm sorry, Seattle fans, I don't think he's going to be able to come through for y'all just because it is a significantly worse situation. But I'd love to be proven wrong because I would love to see anybody but the Rams do well in that division. Not a Rams hater by any means, but kind of want to see us be the only good team in LA. But I digress. Moving on next to the draft class. This was by far one of my favorite draft classes of any team this year. I think the Seahawks absolutely nailed it, hit it out of the park, whatever you want to say about this draft class. Starting off with their first round pick, the O-lineman Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. He was a tackle, I believe, in college, although he is going to transition to guard in the NFL. That's where all the high pundits had him ranked. That's why he was drafted so high. Definitely going to be an immediate day one impact starter, shoring up that offensive line. And, the offensive line is really going to be, really needs to be the best it can be if Sam Darnold is going to have any success this season. So love the pick there. I love addressing your newly signed quarterback very early on. That's a great move from the front office. Nick Emenwari, the safety out of South Carolina, who Coach Mike Dubb was a huge fan of coming into this draft. He actually wanted his Commanders to take Emenwari with their first round pick in the back end of the first round, but he was able to slide as far enough to 35 where the Seahawks were able to swoop him up, and this is a fantastic pickup for them, adding him to a secondary that already features guys like Reek Woolen, Devin Witherspoon, Julian Love, Kobe Bryant. So yeah, I think he will definitely contribute immediately, and they also have Shaquille Griffin as well, Josh Jobs. So yeah, this secondary will be a feared unit. That is 1,000% true, and is honestly one of the biggest reasons why I don't feel like the Seahawks are going to fall off completely, because their defense is so strong and that unit is that hellacious. Moving on through, continuing though with another second round pick they had. This one was a little bit later. They did move up to take this draft to draft this player, Elijah Arroyo, the tight end out of Miami. This was, in all seriousness, probably the best tight end remaining. Of course, you had Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland go in the first round. So Elijah Arroyo was projected to be the very next tight end taken, and he surely was right there taken in the second round with the 50th overall pick. Now, the Seahawks did not own the 50th overall pick However, they did trade up from 52. They also sent a third round pick to Tennessee to trade up 2 spots to nab him there. So apparently they liked him a lot, enough to trade up to want to take him. So we'll see how he contributes. I already mentioned that tight end room is absolutely horrid. AJ Barner is the only or is the starting tight end as of now. I have a feeling Elijah Arroyo will take over very quickly. But yeah, that is another great pick there. So 3 for 3 so far, and I personally believe they went 4 for 4 here. I love the pick of Jalen Milroe here at 92 in the third round. I just think that Sam Darnold, I already mentioned, is somebody who I do not see taking, or maintaining that level he was at last year. So I really do think that this is a great place to take an Alabama quarterback, sit him behind Darnold for a little bit, let him learn the play sheets, the system. That's what I was trying to say. God, let him learn the system, let him learn the play calls, let him, develop. And then maybe in a year or two, this is the only time I truly ever feel like letting a quarterback sit is the right move, is if you take him in the third round or later. Sometimes even in the second round too. But yeah, I feel like this was a great pick for a low risk, high upside potential move for the Seahawks. And it only costs you a third round. So not the worst thing in the world. Getting into the rest of the picks here, we'll go a little bit quicker now that it's later in the draft. Defensive interior lineman Riley Mills out of Notre Dame. One of my personal favorite draft picks, Torrey Horton from Colorado State. Of course, Torrey Horton, of course, played with Shador, Travis Hunter, things like that. Great deep threat. This is where I was talking about MVS potentially getting overtaken. That wide receiver 3 spot getting overtaken very soon. I definitely think Torrey Horton is somebody that can quickly step up in this offense. However, he will provide most of his value from the punt return slot. The Seahawks were 19th last year in the league in terms of punt return yards, and he was obviously a returnman in Colorado State. So I definitely think he will contribute mostly on special teams, but do not be shocked if you see him come up into the depth chart around wide receiver 3. I'll say give it about 5 or 6 weeks, maybe even a little bit longer, but I think the Seahawks will recognize very quickly that Torrey Horton is somebody they want on the field more than MVS. And now rounding out the draft class here with the third 5th round pick, another tight end, Robbie Oates from Alabama, taking Jalen's teammate from Alabama, of course, a little bit of familiarity there. 6th round pick, tackle Bryce Cable-Dew, I think, from Kansas. 7th round pick, running back Damian Martinez, another guy out of Miami, Florida. And then their final 2 picks, the tackle Mason Richmond out of Iowa. And shout out the wide receiver Ricky White III out of UNLV. Shout out UNLV. My childhood best friend, went to UNLV. So always kind of have a soft spot for them in my heart. Love to see guys get drafted out of there and see that program do well. Now let's get into the trades the trades that Seattle made this offseason. Obviously the biggest one, or the biggest ones, the only two to really the notable ones, were trading away DK Metcalf and Geno Smith. Now for both these picks, I'm kind of doing it just like as a whole. They obviously didn't package both these guys together. They obviously sent DK to Pittsburgh, Geno to the Raiders. However, everything that they got in return for them is kind of what I'm going to be going over here. So they traded away DK and Geno, as I mentioned, and a 6th round pick, got back a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 7th. Now, I will give Seattle major credit here because they did all the draft picks that they got back for both these guys were draft picks that they used in this 2025 draft. It's nothing from 2026 or on. They were all in this past draft. So all the players that they got that they use these draft picks on, we already know who they are. Usually you have to kind of wait a little bit to take a full look at trades before you can, give it a grade. However, this one very quickly we'll be able to see who they got. So the guys that they took with those picks were, of course, Elijah Arroyo. Now, they didn't take him with 52. Like I mentioned, they traded up to 50, moved up 2 spots, sent another 3rd round pick to Tennessee for him. So they grabbed him at 50, took Jalen Milroe with the 3rd round pick at 92, and took Damian Martinez. So 2 Miami guys with the 7th round pick and that 223 spot. So these are just going to be the players that I personally have a little bit of an extra eye on this season, just because you're kind of looking at that trade value, looking at how DK does in Pittsburgh, looking at how Geno does in Vegas. I think all of that combined will be very interesting to see, especially if some of these guys can pop off, if Elijah Arroyo turns into a monster, or, Damian Martinez looks to be like the next great running back in the 7th round, pulls an Isaiah Pacheco's. I think something like that will really try to tilt the scales in favor of the Seahawks and give favor to Seahawks fans, just given kind of everything that happened. But yeah, definitely very exciting to see how that plays out. Now, kind of wrapping it up here, I'll go through this one a little quick. The Seahawks schedule, leave it up for a bit if you guys want to pause and take a look at it. It's not a rough schedule by any means. They actually have a lot of winnable games, in my opinion. So that will lead directly into the offseason grade and prediction. And for me, I give them a C+ this offseason. I think that they're going to take a step back, of course. I like a lot of the moves they made. I just think moving off of Geno and DK is going to set you guys back so bad. As much as I don't want to see it, I do like seeing the Seahawks, perform well. I do think that it is going to be a bit of a rough step back for them. As you can see here, I have the absolute basement bottom floor being 5-12, and the ceiling being 8-9, 9-8, something like that. I don't think they get back to double-digit wins again this season. I think there was a good amount of issues last year that kind of reared their ugly head as the season went on. Excuse me. But yeah, I truly don't think that it's going to be as great of a year as y'all are hoping for. I think you're kind of hoping that at this point Jalen Milroe turns into something, and now you have a young QB to compete. You're also really just waiting for Matthew Stafford to retire, because that's your biggest competition in the division. I think if you only have to worry about Brock Purdy with this defense, you're looking pretty happy going on with the rest of it, because you own the Cardinals. You haven't lost to the Cardinals since 2021, and that's kind of into my prediction a little bit here. But yeah, I definitely think I'll quickly go over some of the guys that I think like for sure wins for them this year. I have them beating the Cardinals twice. Haven't lost to them since 2021. They're on a 7-game win streak against the Cardinals, and Kyler Murray is 2-8 against the Seahawks. So they just own the COD player. It is what it is. Sorry, Cardinals fans. Saints, I think this is pretty standard. I think the Saints have a legit chance to go 0-17 this year. So enough said there. Titans, this one is a little bit shaky, but I truly do have confidence in the coaching staff and in the Seahawks and in Sam Darnold, I should say. Depending on how great Ward is out of the gate, it could be a little interesting, but I mean, the team around Ward is just absolutely trash and abysmal, so we'll see what happens there. Colts, I've sold any and all stock I have in Anthony Richardson, so this should relatively be an easy win with the defense and Sam Darnold, like I mentioned. And then Panthers and Vikings is kind of like pick and choose, because I truly feel like they will win one of those games. I just don't know which one. Will it be the Sam Darnold revenge game against the Vikings, or will it be, because I was also a little bit high on the Panthers, will it be that Bryce Young isn't that guy and all the hype around them this offseason was not warranted and they're just going to fall over and die essentially again this year? So we'll see what happens. I don't feel like they can win both of those games, or depending on how it goes, but they should definitely win one. So yeah, with that all being said, guys, thank you so much for joining and watching. Please don't be sure to check out the Hit Squad and their socials here as well. And don't forget to as well check out the Lockdown Defense Sports Network on all social media. We are on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, and Gmail. Like I mentioned last week, still working on the carrier pigeon, but eventually we will get there. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like I mentioned, be on the lookout for those other videos this week. I believe we have the Niners and the Rams coming out, and we will see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.